My sister laughed when I told her I had spent 4 months making a scrapbook just for her. When she opened it, she mocked the page that said, "My sister inspires me," turning my effort into a joke. Her cruelty showed me exactly how little she valued my heart. You know, I thought my sister Sophia and I were inseparable, tied together by grief, by blood, by everything. But the night of her 28th birthday, I walked in with a lovingly made cake and walked out with my heart in pieces, realizing the person I'd sacrificed everything for saw me as nothing more than a personal ATM and a punchline. I remember holding that cake, a beautiful, 4-day labor of love I'd poured my heart into, with its hand-sculpted fondant roses. I was so proud. Sophia had asked me to design her whole 28th birthday party, so I let myself in early with my key, planning to finish setting up. But as I stepped through the doorway, I realized the party had already started. And they weren't waiting for me. They were laughing. Loudly. Sophia, surrounded by her 5 best friends, spun around, her face instantly shifting from pure joy to utter panic. "Oh my gosh, you're here." It was less a greeting, more an accusation. Her friend Chloe, however, just kept on laughing. "Tell her what you said about Christmas." Chloe practically shrieked, nudging Sophia. My sister shook her head frantically, eyes wide, but it was too late. Chloe was on a roll. "She said you bought her that pricey jewelry thinking it meant anything." My stomach dropped. I had saved for 7 months, making sacrifices, just to get her that Tiffany necklace. And Chloe continued, relishing the moment, "She just gave you a $15 gift card, and you sobbed." Everyone erupted in laughter again, a chorus of mockery that echoed through the apartment. I carefully, almost reverently, placed my beautiful cake on the counter, protecting those fragile fondant roses. My hands were already shaking. "You asked me to help early," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. Sophia just rolled her eyes, already pouring more wine for herself. "Drop off the cake, please. Don't bother inserting yourself." It was a cold dismissal, like I was an unwanted delivery person. Emily, another one of her companions, nodded in agreement. "She always complains about your best buddy behavior. Always griping." My mind reeled. Always griping, Sophia called me every single night, sometimes for hours, to complain about her work, her boss, her life. "You call me daily," I pointed out, my voice gaining a desperate edge. Sophia let out a harsh, fake laugh. "Your free treatment. A real therapist costs money." She turned to her friends, a conspiratorial smirk on her face. "She actually believes I respect her love life advice." More laughter. Chloe, still the ringleader, added, "You remember her offering to do your cosmetics for Luke's wedding?" Sophia moaned dramatically. After watching 2 YouTube videos, she felt qualified. Then, directly to me, in the cruelest imitation, *beautiful work, she mimicked, then took a long drink of wine. What was I supposed to say? "Your tiny pastime made you proud." Then Rachel, another friend, chimed in. "Which sister prepared your odd graduation scrapbook?" Sophia's eyes lit up with malicious glee. She grabbed something from the coffee table. "My scrapbook. 4 months of careful work, chronicling our childhood memories." She opened it to a page where I'd written about my pride in her. "Look at this sad creature. Listen to this caption. My lovely sister inspires me daily." And they all laughed. Again. It felt like a physical blow. Sophia looked at me, her eyes devoid of warmth. "I sensed your pain. You don't have true pals, so I act close." She waved a hand at her friends. These are my genuine sisters. I only share DNA with you." Rachel poured more wine for everyone, making sure to conspicuously skip me. My vision blurred, tears stinging. Then came the grand finale. "Tell her about the wedding." Sophia's nasty joy was palpable. "I'm engaged shortly." That caught me off guard. My mind flashed to Luke, Sophia's long-term boyfriend. "Luke proposes next month. Since I chose the ring, I know." She smiled, a cruel, triumphant smirk. "My maid of honor won't be you." I saw her friends grin, already knowing this would crush me. "The maid of honor is Chloe. Rachel, Emily, and my college roommate are bridesmaids." She paused, savoring the moment. "You're not invited to the bachelorette celebration." My bachelorette celebration had been a dream we'd shared since childhood. 4 years. I was her sister. Sophia stood up and walked over to me, her face inches from mine. "Exactly. Not my friend, but my sister. Differences exist." Her gaze dropped to my cake. "Like this cake. Trying too hard. Bakers are professionals for a reason." And then, she deliberately fingered the icing, ruining the delicate pattern. Emily, ever the loyal sidekick, added, "You insist on making everything about you. She threw you the surprise party you stated you didn't want." I stared at her in disbelief. My surprise party was after she said she felt neglected on her birthday. You liked it. You cried joyously. Sophia let out another cold laugh. I sobbed in shame. You invited random high school friends I haven't seen in years. She looked at her friends, rolling her eyes. She assumed I'd want to see them. The doorbell rang, signaling more guests, the real celebration. Sophia grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly hard. Leave the cake and go. I looked around at the decorations I'd spent hours yesterday setting up. My whole place, decked out. Sophia just shrugged. A kid's party, it seems. Redoing it anyhow. Her friends were already tearing down the streamers I'd painstakingly prepared. The worst part came then. Sophia spoke loudly, for the benefit of the arriving guests. She believes our parents' deaths bonded us. 4 years. 4 years since Mom and Dad died, and we'd sworn to always support each other. That trauma bonding is phony. Real friends provide emotional support. The words cut deeper than anything else, invalidating our shared grief, our promise. Just then, Aunt Karen arrived for the party. She took one look at my face and the wrecked cake. What's happening? Sophia, ever the chameleon, instantly changed her pitch. Oh, Aunt Karen. My sister dropped the cake. She added quickly, no, she can't remain. But Rachel, already drunk, yelled out the truth. Sophia said she's tired of imitating her sibling. Aunt Karen's face went black. Pretending. Her gaze locked onto Sophia, and her voice cut through the party hubbub like a knife. Due to your inability to pay, your sister covers half your rent. The room went completely silent. Sophia flushed scarlet. Aunt Karen, radiating quiet fury, stood between us, her voice piercing. Drawing more people to the doorway. Sophia's scarlet cheeks instantly went white. The audience behind Aunt Karen grew, and they heard every word. Sophia tried to laugh it off, but it sounded fake, hollow. Aunt Karen kept talking, and everyone in the apartment knew. I'd never seen her look at Sophia like a stranger instead of her niece. Someone's phone buzzed, and Sophia's friends exchanged awkward stares as the silence deepened. I could see Chloe and Isabel debating whether to speak or keep silent. Maya set her wine glass down, eyes on the floor. Sophia opened her lips to speak but said nothing. I walked to the entrance, retrieved my handbag, and began gathering the few decorations I had paid for. My half-owned streamers and banners. Aunt Karen followed me down the hallway, her hand firm on my shoulder. Sophia remained at the living room doorway, a statue. The damaged cake was still behind her on the counter, fondant flowers ruined by her finger. Aunt Karen's voice was lower now, but stern. She ordered me to stay with her tonight, to talk about this. I could only nod. My voice wasn't working right. As we approached the elevator, Sophia started talking to her companions, her voice growing louder, defensive. The elevator doors closed before I heard her apology on this occasion. At Aunt Karen's place, the tears finally fell. The kind of crying that makes you gasp and tremble, that shakes your whole body. She made tea in her kitchen while I sat on her couch, unable to stop. She sat next to me, handing me the steaming mug. I told her everything, how Sophia called me every night to whine about her job, her coworkers, Luke, everything. How I genuinely felt we were close, that those calls meant something, that I was helping her. I told her how I'd paid half her rent for 3 years because she always complained her work didn't pay enough. Aunt Karen just listened, nodding or making small noises, never interrupting. I told her how I'd thought Sophia would love the necklace, the scrapbook, all the things I'd created or bought. I couldn't stop talking, even with my voice broken. Aunt Karen took out her phone and showed me Sophia's texts from the past year. Money requests, sure, but also casual mentions of expensive dinners with Luke, plans for lavish weekend excursions. The words on the screen made my stomach turn. Hearing someone else claim Sophia was exploiting me made it sickeningly true. Sisters didn't do this to each other. I barely slept in Aunt Karen's guest room. I just stared at the ceiling, replaying every single conversation with Sophia. All those late-night calls, when she moaned about everything, they seemed different now. Like I was just a convenient person to dump her troubles on, without any thought for my feelings or time. Every bit of advice I'd given her about Luke, her career, her life, she'd laughed at it with her friends, calling me pitiful, claiming I had no true friends. So I'd try to force connection. I kept trying to find moments, things she'd said, that proved we were close. They all looked different now. I watched the ceiling fan spin until the sky began to lighten. The next morning, I called in sick. I couldn't pretend everything was normal. I told my supervisor it was a family emergency, which, in a very real way, it was. Aunt Karen served breakfast, and we sat at her kitchen table, planning how to financially disentangle from Sophia. She wrote on a notebook as we spoke, first, stop the automated rent transfer. Second, close our common household account. Third, remove my name from all shared invoices. The list kept expanding, and I felt sick seeing how complicated our lives had become. I checked my phone, the rent payment was due in 6 days. Sophia had always complained her job wasn't paying enough, so I'd automatically sent mine and her half every month. Now I wondered if that was genuine or just another deception. My screen showed months and months of money I'd sent her, and I wanted to hurl my phone across the room. Aunt Karen gently suggested I check Sophia's social media for her spending habits. Despite feeling a pang of guilt, I opened the apps. Posts about pricey brunches with her friends, new designer bags, weekend excursions with Luke to places I could never afford. Images of her wearing outfits that cost more than my rent, pictures from nice restaurants, cocktails, shopping bags. All of it posted after I'd been eating ramen and peanut butter sandwiches to help pay her rent. She'd told me she needed my financial aid, and the post dates matched perfectly. Every post I read made me feel stupider, more naive for trusting her. My phone buzzed constantly with Sophia's calls. I sent every one to voicemail. I found 12 missed calls and dozens of texts. The first few texts were apologies, saying she didn't mean it, that we should talk. Then they turned angry. She said I was emotional. That Aunt Karen didn't understand our connection. That everyone vents to friends and I was overreacting. I watched the text stack up on my screen without answering. She alleged intoxicated buddies pressured her to say unpleasant things. She stated I was overreacting to everything. She advised me to quit being sensitive and come home so we could discuss this as adults. I left my phone face down on the table. I waited until Tuesday, when Sophia would be downtown at her office. My apartment key felt heavy in my hand as I opened the door and entered. Although everything looked the same, everything felt different. The couch we bought at the furniture store last year lay against the wall, with my hand-sewn throw cushions. The books we'd read and debated over wine on Friday nights now felt like Sophia's way of wasting time before her actual friends arrived. The wall-mounted framed photos made my stomach turn. Our beach photos from last summer, where we laughed so hard we couldn't breathe. I'd believed those times mattered. I grabbed my bag from the closet and threw stuff in without folding. Quickly, shirts, jeans, underwear from drawers, shoes shoved into bags. I needed to go before Sophia came home early or I cried again. Sophia had insisted on alphabetizing the crucial paperwork in our shared file cabinet, my birth certificate, SSN, passport, and all our parents' death documentation. I took my name-marked items and left the others. In the bathroom, I grabbed my toothbrush and Aunt Karen's expensive Christmas face cream. Sophia's cosmetics, bought with rent money, covered most of the counter. It felt better to be angry than wounded. On the kitchen counter, written on the back of a takeaway receipt in Sophia's excellent handwriting, was a note. The paper was slightly crumpled, like she'd scribbled quickly or thrown it down. I snatched it up and read the words that made things worse, and clearer, not sorry. Not acknowledging her public statement, just money worries and labeling me foolish for feeling humiliated publicly. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. Proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy for feeling exploited. Sophia was like this when nobody performed for her or gave her what she wanted. The apartment seemed smaller, the walls closing in. I collected my luggage and left, without looking back, leaving my key on the counter next to her message. Work the next day was difficult. The words blurred as I stared at my computer screen. Julia, my coworker, kept looking at me between calls. We usually discussed projects and deadlines, nothing personal, even after 3 years of working together. She surprised me by bringing 2 deli sandwiches to my desk for lunch. She handed me one and pulled up a chair without asking. I tried to smile, to look okay, but my face wouldn't cooperate. She patiently waited until I offered her a summary of the party, the basics, about Sophia being harsh and Aunt Karen exposing the rent situation. Julia listened without interrupting, without offering hollow consolation or saying, things will be okay. When I finished, she simply said her roommate had left and the spare room was available if I wanted a place. She offered a sensible solution, without pity or awkwardness. Almost sobbing in the workplace, I held it together until I could retreat to the toilet. We met at Julia's place across town after work. The building was older than Sophia's and mine, but well-maintained and full of charm. I saw the unoccupied room. It was smaller than my old one, but the rent was lower, and it felt clean, uncomplicated. No memories on the walls, no furnishings I'd bought believing I was making a home with my sister. Julia clearly detailed her home rules, simple respect for shared space. She described her typical evening routine, preferring silence after 10 p.m. Everything seemed balanced and fair, like she regarded me as an equal, not a tool. I accepted, shaking her hand like grown-ups doing business. She gave me an extra key and said I could move in whenever. This key felt lighter than the one I'd left at Sophia's. I held my phone for 20 minutes in Aunt Karen's guest room before seeing my texts that evening. The sentence to Sophia was typed without thinking, without softening it. No after information, just packing out and paying this month's rent. She may pay for it herself or find someone else. I sent it before I could delete and rephrase it. The response came so quickly she must have been glancing at her phone. All uppercase letters, calling me selfish and ungrateful for abandoning her when she needed me. More texts followed, harsher than the previous, blaming me for wrecking her life and being emotional about nothing. My hands trembled as I placed my phone face down on the nightstand. Aunt Karen's front door banged at 9 p.m., a sound clearly audible from the upper guest room. Sophia's high-pitched, weeping voice repeated my name through the walls. I stayed in bed while Aunt Karen walked to the door and calmly told Sophia she couldn't come in. Sophia wailed that she didn't mean such things, that her companions were intoxicated and encouraged her, and that I abandoned her over a misunderstanding. She repeated her text messages, her reasons, with tears in her voice. Aunt Karen kept her cool, not allowing Sophia to take advantage. Sophia's vehicle started and drove away after about 10 minutes of talking. My chest was tense throughout. Part of me almost wanted to rush downstairs and mend things. The other part, my new instinct, knew that that was the issue. Aunt Karen returned inside and found me on the guest bed. It was evident that I was fine, so she sat next to me. She cut through my confusion and shame by saying Sophia wasn't accepting responsibility, just concerned about losing her free ride. Clarity helped, but I felt awful for feeling guilty, like I'd betrayed Sophia by seeing the truth. Aunt Karen patted my shoulder and told me that sincere apologies don't blame or excuse. I nodded and tried to trust her, but years of habit made me want to contact Sophia, to settle things. Bags, boxes, and trips across town dominated the weekend. Aunt Karen drove up Saturday morning and, while Sophia was away, loaded my belongings from her apartment. We arranged it that way to avoid another fight or Sophia guilting me into remaining. Aunt Karen's trunk and rear seat held most of my clothing, books, and self-purchased kitchen equipment. I didn't have the energy to argue over who paid what amount or who got the sofa, so we left the furniture we'd shared costs on. Julia helped us move everything to her flat. The three of us worked efficiently, almost silently. By Sunday afternoon, my clothing was in the closet and my books on the shelf in my new room. The space felt empty, yet entirely mine. It held no common past, no unfulfilled commitments. Monday morning before work, I went to the bank. The desk clerk politely requested my ID and account details without questioning why I was deleting someone from my accounts. She swiftly processed the documents and showed me where to sign. Sophia's name was removed from the household account we'd set up 3 years ago, the one I routinely transferred rent and utilities into. I deleted that account and started one in my name. The paperwork took less than 30 minutes, and I felt lighter after leaving the automated doors, like severing a rope that had been hauling me beneath the surface. Sophia texted me from a different number because I'd blocked her main one. Luke's mother requested a meeting before the engagement to resolve issues. Like this was just a minor conflict to resolve. I was supposed to assist Sophia in appearing nice to her prospective in-laws, to pretend everything was all right. After blocking the new number, I blocked Chloe, Isabel, and Maya in my contacts, every number from the party night. Everyone who'd laughed while Sophia tore me apart. After hovering over the erase button, I watched each name disappear from my phone. I was tired of being controlled, of being made smaller so Sophia could feel bigger. As I deleted names from my life, my chest felt lighter. Julia departed for her hospital duty at 6 a.m. most mornings. Her corridor footsteps were soft as she attempted not to wake me. Though I typically heard her, I stayed in bed, appreciative of the consideration. Because she worked 12-hour shifts 3 days a week, I had the flat to myself for long periods after work. She took off other days. When I returned, she'd often be preparing supper or reading on the sofa and would ask if I wanted to join her, without pressure. We settled into a routine of being together without interacting. Some evenings, I worked on my laptop at the kitchen table while she watched TV, and the silence was pleasant, comfortable. Julia would stop what she was doing to listen when I wanted to talk about Sophia, the party, or my anger. She only gave counsel when requested. Mostly, she let me vent until I ran out of words, without offering any solutions. Having someone who gave me space but supported me was so different from Sophia. 2 weeks after I moved out, a stranger called. Something compelled me to answer. It was Thora Emery, the landlady of Sophia and my old flat. She sounded exhausted and irritated when she questioned whether I'd quit the lease without notice. My stomach fell. I recognized Sophia's manipulation. I said I gave written notice, paid my rent through the month, and supplied a forwarding address for any deposit refund. Thora paused before asking why Sophia said I'd vanished and left her with the whole rent. I inhaled and informed her that Sophia could have paid the whole amount all along, that I'd been covering half because she stated she couldn't. That was BS, Thora said, making a note. She'd seen Sophia driving a new car in the parking garage last week. A BMW, she replied, wondering how someone with little money could purchase a premium car. Confirmation hit me hard. Sophia had been lying about her finances and using my money to buy herself fancy items, but I was too trusting to investigate it. Thanking Thora for calling, I hung up with shaking hands. My rage was sharp and intense, unlike my earlier hurt. Sophia was harsh beyond the celebration. She stole from me for months, possibly years. Aunt Karen contacted me that night to recommend Isadora Mann, a therapist. She stated Isadora specialized in family trauma and had helped numerous friends through challenging situations. Aunt Karen proposed the appointment for the next week, and honestly, I was weary of being furious all the time. Isadora's office was in a modest downtown building with pastel blue walls and plants throughout. She was maybe 50, with gray hair tied back and gentle eyes that didn't look away when I started chatting. I told her about the celebration. Sophia calling me pitiful, the cake, the scrapbook, and how she insulted everything I did for her. I broke down weeping halfway through recounting her companion's laughter. Isadora gave me tissues and waited until I could breathe before saying something that transformed my perspective. She said Sophia's actions weren't just cruel. It was emotionally abusive, and had probably been going on for years because she was my sister. I'd always linked abuse with physical violence, so I was wary. But Isadora said emotional abuse was just as harmful. Using someone for money and making them feel useless, phoning daily to vent but never listening, mocking their love attempts, all of those were abuse. I sat in her office feeling like someone had finally put voice to my unnamed feelings. During our second session, Isadora had me make 2 lists. Sophia valued, and Sophia utilized, me. I expected that the valued task to be short, but the utilized list grew. She called every night to whine about work, but hung up when I shared my issues. One weekend, she took my car and returned it with an empty petrol tank and new scrapes. She forgot my birthday but anticipated big celebrations on hers. She handed me a $25 gift card for Christmas after I spent hundreds on her gifts. As memories came back, my handwriting got messier, and the list reached 2 pages. Only 3 items were on the devalued list. She gave me soup 2 years ago when I was sick. 3 years ago, she helped me move into my first apartment. She contacted me after our parents' burial to say we only had each other. All 3 happened before or just after our parents died. Nothing recent was listed. The proof was in black and white. I felt nauseous looking at the pages. Sophia stopped liking me years ago, but I kept attempting to win her affection. Isadora showed me Sophia's post-funeral metamorphosis. Though selfish, she wasn't harsh before our parents died. She became demanding and cold, taking whatever I provided without returning. I thought we supported each other through grief. Through the loss, we relied on our sibling relationship. I supported her as she vented her anger and anguish on me. She vented her sadness by shrinking me, punishing someone who wouldn't fight back. I became her emotional garbage can where she could just dump her bad sentiments. The discovery made me so upset I left the session early and walked around the block 3 times before getting in my car. She used me all those times I stayed up listening to her weep about losing our parents, comforting and reassuring her. She never inquired how I was grieving or observed my struggles. Just took, until our relationship was just her needs and my attempts to satisfy them. At work, I tackled a major job my employer gave me. Reorganizing our customer database was something I'd put off for weeks. Now, without Sophia contacting me every night, I had day-end vigor. I worked late a couple of nights on spreadsheets and data entry that required new concentration. My manager visited my desk one day and praised my efforts. She said she'd noticed my engagement recently. The observation-based compliment felt better than Sophia's occasional praise, because it wasn't manipulated. I noticed how much brain space Sophia's nightly calls took. How weary I was trying to address her problems while disregarding my own career and life. That space was mine again, and I could utilize it for important things. Aunt Karen called me to ask me to Sunday supper and said she'd alerted relatives about the gathering. My gut clenched with worry about their reaction. Would people think I overreacted? Would they say to forgive Sophia because she's family? Aunt Karen must have detected my fear and my quiet because she swiftly added that everyone supported me and was outraged with Sophia for her treatment. I had supper at Aunt Karen's with my uncle and 2 cousins I hadn't seen in months. I arrived worried, expecting unpleasant talks or pressure to reconcile, but my uncle hugged me and said he was proud of my departure. My cousins had heard about Sophia's actions and couldn't believe she was that harsh. The support was astounding. It was like I'd been expecting criticism, but got affirmation instead. My cousin Hazel told me about Sophia grumbling about the food and decorations at her college graduation celebration years ago during supper. Sophia had made Hazel feel dumb for planning everything alone. My other cousin said Sophia made weight-related comments to his girlfriend over Thanksgiving, which made everyone uncomfortable. Sophia took money from my uncle last year and never paid it back, then became upset when he asked. After hearing everyone's stories, I concluded Sophia's brutality wasn't exceptional. Family members were consistently dismissed and mistreated by her. Because she was my sister, I believed I had to put up with everything. Everyone else had distanced her, set limits, and stopped expecting her kindness. I was the only one wanting to establish a close connection with someone who consistently rejected me. Hazel grabbed me aside after we finished lunch and told me Sophia had contacted her 3 days earlier for money. Sophia said I abandoned her and she couldn't pay rent, making it look like I suddenly departed. Hazel stated she told Sophia no and advised she obtain a second job, as I did when I supported us. Sophia was irritated and hung up, which wasn't surprising. She was calling relatives for money while driving a BMW. That made my blood boil. Despite losing me, she hadn't changed her conduct or learned anything. She wanted to utilize someone else who would provide her money and emotional support without demanding anything in return. I was glad my family saw through her deceit and didn't fall for her victim play as I had. 3 weeks after moving out, I woke up without a tight chest for the first time in months. My nightly dreams of Sophia laughing at me while I explained myself ceased. Now they only came once or twice a week, and I could sleep afterward instead of being awake until dawn. I started preparing weekend dinners with Julia. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti or stir-fries. But it felt lovely to share a kitchen with someone who didn't judge my vegetable chopping or tell me I was doing everything wrong. She offered to meet her friends at a pub one Thursday night, but I almost declined, since seeing new people worried me after Sophia. When I went, her buddies were kind. They asked about my life and were interested. Nobody tracked who bought drinks or chatted more. Nobody asked why I relocated or for information I wasn't ready to reveal. Andrew, one of her pals, related a humorous tale about his sister drama, and everyone laughed. I realized I hadn't thought about Sophia in 3 hours when walking home that night. I checked my email the next morning and found a strange address. The subject line, "Please read this." I opened it and found Sophia's name at the bottom. I'd blocked her main account, so she must have started another. Despite knowing better, I read the 10-paragraph email. It started with a genuine apology for 2 phrases. She wrote that I was driving the family apart by not talking to her. She said she was inebriated during the party and didn't intend it. The following paragraph accused me of being too sensitive and not understanding that friends vent. She wrote that I was making things worse by lying to relatives about her. I stopped reading halfway and clicked erase. Although my fingers trembled, I clicked. The email vanished, and I closed my laptop. Without reading the rest, I knew it wouldn't get better. I discussed the email with Isadora that week in therapy. I couldn't explain why Sophia's apology seemed incorrect when she asked me. Isadora drew a center line on a notebook. One side was a true apology, the other a false. She said, genuine apologies recognize harm without justifications. They don't say, but, or blame the victim. I was intoxicated or, you're overly sensitive are excuses for fake apologies. Sophia's email had both. Isadora instructed me to tally how often Sophia took responsibility versus blamed or excused me. I recognized the email was a pile of bogus apologies. This paradigm helped me overcome my guilt. I wasn't cruel by not answering. I was protecting myself against a non-sorry person. Something unexpected happened when I checked my bank account that week. I had more cash than intended. Not having Sophia's portion of the rent every month left me with money after bills. After years of living on a tight budget, I forgot how it felt to have extra money. I put $900 on my credit card after seeing it on my account, largely from Sophia's crises during the last year. Right then, I paid up the balance. I created a savings account and put $300 in. I stared at the screen, because I'd never saved before. Sophia always used any excess money on herself or for items she couldn't afford. Now I was saving money to construct something instead of just surviving. Aunt Karen called Sunday afternoon to invite me to tea. At her place, she sat me at her kitchen table with a serious face. Sophia had returned to live with Mom and Luke, since she couldn't afford the apartment alone. Luke's parents didn't want Sophia to live with him before getting engaged. This event caused Luke and his family to argue. Aunt Karen stated Sophia was upset and snapping at Luke and moaning. Hearing this made me feel a complicated mix of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated seeing Sophia finally being punished for taking me for granted, but I was also primarily sad and exhausted. Hearing that my closest family member was hurting didn't help me feel better after losing her. It reminded me that our connection was never real. I told Isadora I felt bad for being delighted Sophia was punished at my next therapy appointment. Isadora leaned forward and uttered something memorable. I lost an illusion of a relationship with Sophia. The sister I thought I had, the one who valued me and cared about me, was never real. Sophia showed me who she was at that party. Grieving what I thought we had was valid, but it was different from grieving a real, mutual relationship. This explained why I was so puzzled. I grieved for my imagined sister, not my real sister. I lamented something that never existed. A month after the party, Chloe messaged me on social media. I almost erased it without reading, but curiosity won. She apologized for laughing at me and pushing Sophia to be harsh. After I left, She saw Sophia slide and realized how toxic their buddy circle was. Chloe said she'd left Sophia to improve herself. Her message ended with a request to talk. I read it twice and dismissed the app without reacting. Maybe Chloe apologized. Maybe she learned something. I owed her neither time nor forgiveness. She had humiliated me in a packed room. I wasn't responsible for her progress. On Wednesday, my supervisor summoned me into her office, making me queasy. Calls to the boss's office were never good. After I sat down, she grinned and told me I was promoted to senior associate. She stated I'd pleased the team with my initiative and dedication over the last month. The promotion brought a raise and greater perks. Thanking her, I tried to seem professional, but I was screaming with delight inside. Without Sophia's drama, nightly phone calls, and crisis management, I could focus on my profession. I made progress and built something for myself instead of supporting someone who didn't appreciate it. Julia muted an ad and looked at me that weekend while watching TV. She wanted a cat and asked if we could adopt one. The concept first startled me. After Sophia, I was afraid to share responsibility for a pet. I suddenly noticed it was different. Julia wanted me to construct something nice with her, to make her apartment feel like home instead of just a getaway. She wasn't asking me to watch her pet. She requested we share our cat's care. Before thinking, I said yes. On Sunday morning, we strolled through rows of caged animals at the shelter. Most ignored us or growled, but one orange tabby meowed at us from the bars. The shelter worker said his name was Marmalade and he'd been there for 3 months because people preferred kittens over adult cats. We could hear the cat purring across the room as Julia unlocked the cage. She stared at me. I nodded. The worker helped us load Julia's car with the cat carrier. After we completed the adoption papers, Julia suggested renaming him after his fur on the way home. I offered Toast, and she laughed, saying, "Excellent." Back at the apartment, we put up his litter box and feeding dishes. Toast sniffed everywhere and marked his territory. I saw balanced relationships when Julia and I worked together to make him comfortable, sharing this duty on equal terms. Scores were not kept. Nobody took advantage. We took care of things jointly because we wanted to. I was having my salad at my desk the next day when the receptionist phoned my extension. She claimed someone came to visit me. Before I could ask who, Sophia's voice in the background grew louder. I grabbed my phone and went to the lobby where Sophia was crying beside the front desk. She noticed me and was heading rapidly toward me, stating we wanted to chat. I instructed the receptionist to contact security and retreated to the hallway. Sophia said I was theatrical and we were sisters and she wanted 5 minutes. In seconds, security came. 2 individuals I'd seen in the building, looking familiar. I begged them to remove this individual since I didn't want to see her. Sophia cried more and reached for my arm, but a security officer gently prevented her. She repeated my name as they escorted her out. My cheeks heated up as my coworkers stared at their workstations. I returned to my office and locked the door, sitting in my chair with my hands trembling so violently I had to put them on the desk. The shaking came in waves every time I replayed Sophia weeping in the lobby for over an hour. Under the shaking was something else, something resembling pride. The boundary was mine. Even though she wept and created a scene, I hadn't wanted to talk to her to stop it. At 3 p.m., my manager came to my door to ask if I had time. I accompanied her to her office, anticipating a lecture about workplace drama. Instead, she closed the door and asked whether I was okay. I hastily mentioned it was a family matter and apologized for the disturbance. She declined the apologies and claimed she'd already told security to update their system with Sophia's photo to prevent her from entering. I was surprised by my workplace's institutional assistance in protecting me from Sophia. My manager asked whether I wanted to take the day off, but I preferred to work. Nodding, she said her door was open if I needed anything more. Isadora and I started something new in therapy that week. She advised me to discuss my parents' death and Sophia's treachery separately, to process them as distinct experiences. As I spoke, I realized I'd never grieved my parents because I was too busy raising Sophia. Sophia came apart quickly when Mom and Dad died. So, I held everything together. I organized the funeral, handled estate papers, fed and washed Sophia, and worked. I thought I was strong, being a nice sister, but I was only avoiding sadness. Now, I was feeling everything, including that delayed anguish. 3 years of suppressed anguish surfacing. Isadora showed me Sophia weaponized our parents' memories, used their death to bind me to her. Sophia called my trauma bond artificial, but it was real, just not mutual. For the first time in a year, I traveled to the cemetery on Saturday morning. Sophia constantly wanted to go together and make it emotional, but I'd avoided it. After parking near the gate, I strolled through rows of headstones to find theirs under an oak tree. I sat on the lawn and told them about the party and Sophia's words. I regretted having Sophia exploit their memories to avoid preserving their wishes for us. The tears seemed cleaner than at home, like they were washing something out instead of expressing grief, talking, sobbing, and sitting in quiet. I spent about 2 hours there. After leaving, I felt lighter yet sadder, grieving them properly instead of caring for Sophia. Aunt Karen called the next week to invite me to supper. I drove to her house after work and discovered her preparing my mom's lasagna. She quietly addressed Sophia and Luke's breakup at the kitchen table as the dinner prepared. Sophia coming in without helping financially had upset his family. Sophia expected Luke to support her as I did, but Luke expected her to divide expenditures like typical couples. When he refused and his parents intervened, the romance ended. Aunt Karen reported Sophia was distraught and briefly lived with her. I felt conflicted after hearing this. Part of me felt vindicated, seeing Sophia pay for expecting everyone to carry her. However, I felt terrible since she was my sister, and she was grieving from her own decisions. Separating vindication, grief, and guilt was hard work that I'd need to accomplish in therapy. I discussed the breakup and my conflicted feelings with Isadora in our next session. She made me comprehend that Sophia's actions caused her repercussions. Sophia's difficulties and feelings regarding the inevitable consequences of mistreating others weren't my responsibility. I didn't do anything wrong, but years of being Sophia's emotional support system made me feel guilty. Isadora asked me what I wanted from my connection with Sophia in the future. I told her I needed more time to find out who I was without her incessant requirements in my thoughts. On a Wednesday, 2 months after the party, I got ready for work as usual. Made coffee. Fed toast, checked emails, drove to work. Lunchtime was when I realized I hadn't thought about Sophia all morning. She hadn't crossed my mind in 3 days. Not after briefly telling Julia about the split. I was losing my obsession with replaying discussions and analyzing her actions. I was establishing a life without Sophia's turmoil and wants. My mind was freer now, working on weekends and talking to friends without mentioning my sister. The difference was great enough that I texted Isadora, who said it was actual improvement. Julia and I arranged a modest dinner party with 3 college friends that weekend. Cooking and setting the meal made me uneasy about meeting new people. However, the evening went well. Everyone laughing, telling anecdotes, and inquiring about my life. They asked me questions because they wanted the answers, not because they needed anything or were gathering information. A graphic designer buddy of Julia's and I discussed her ideas for over an hour. Since we had toast, another friend had got a dog and needed help on introducing dogs to new places. I chuckled for the first time in months, relishing the moment rather than faking enjoyment. These folks connected with me as an equal, not as a servant. A Sophia written letter was in my mailbox on Tuesday when I got home from work. Aunt Karen had forecasted it. She had requested to screen my mail, but I declined. The big envelope included several pages. Toast cuddled next to me on the couch as I gently unwrapped it. Sophia had handwritten 6 pages, front and back. The letter began with a genuine apology, without excuses or explanations. She stated her therapist was helping her realize how she handled others following her separation with Luke. She accepted responsibility for exploiting me financially and emotionally, saying terrible things during the party, and taking me for granted for years. She didn't beg for forgiveness or touch. She apologized and understood if I never spoke to her again. I read the letter again to find the catch, the concealed blame or manipulation. Sophia's apology felt sincere, not attempting to make me correct anything. I folded it back into the envelope and placed it on the coffee table, unsure what to do. I read sections of the letter to Isadora on Thursday. We discussed how to respond, if I wanted to. Isadora inquired what I needed from Sophia to feel comfortable with future communication. I suggested the letter could wait until I decided what I wanted, not what Sophia required. I placed myself before my sister for the first time. Sophia's letter showed she was improving, but I didn't have to instantly accept her back. I could take my time and reconnect when I was ready, not pressured. Yes, Isadora remarked, it was healthy that I was safeguarding my recovery above Sophia's sentiments. You could delay the letter as long as needed. Sophia's letter was followed by my uncle's birthday party invitation 2 weeks later. I instantly noted that Sophia's name wasn't on it, simply mine, addressed to me at Julia's flat, indicating that Aunt Karen had informed the family of my new address. My uncle was thrilled to hear I was coming when I phoned to confirm. He checked in on me and the new house without mentioning Sophia. The silence felt purposeful, like everyone had decided not to mention her unless I did. On Saturday afternoon, I traveled to my uncle's house with a present I chose without bothering about Sophia's opinion or the packaging. I was unpreparedly apprehensive as I approached the front door, like I was being tested. But when my aunt answered the door and hugged me longer than usual, the tension eased. After greeting me cordially, my relatives positioned themselves around me to provide support. Everyone appeared to care about making me comfortable at the tiny family celebration. After thanking me for the present, my uncle asked about my employment and listened instead of talking about himself. I ate lunch on the back patio with my younger cousin and Aunt Karen, who kept eyeing me. No one acknowledged Sophia, but her absence loomed like weather nobody wanted to accept. While I loved the support and how everyone tried to make me feel important, it made me sad. Our family had irrevocably split into before and after the birthday party event, and we were all learning how to adjust. My cousin Hazel took me apart from the others near the garden after lunch. She twisted her bracelet around her wrist, looking uncomfortable yet resolute. She said Sophia had been phoning her to check on me and see what I was doing. Sophia seemed concerned, not manipulating or phony, Hazel remarked. Hearing this made me feel conflicted because part of me wanted Sophia to care, but another part knew I needed space. Hazel stated Sophia had requested her to inform me she was respecting my boundaries, wouldn't contact me directly, but was thinking about me. I thanked Hazel for informing me and requested her not to tell Sophia about my life. Hazel nodded and grabbed my hand, understanding without explanation. Sophia inquiring about me through relatives rather than visiting my flat or office signified something. Despite her struggle, she was listening to me and giving me room. That constraint demonstrated she was striving to modify her conduct. Not just her words, making it more important than her 6-page apologetic letter. I returned to the party feeling lighter, like knowing Sophia was hurting with our parting, but respecting it, made it less harsh. Toast curled up on my chair while I sat at my desk with paper and a pen 3 months after the party. For weeks, I reread Sophia's letter, searching every syllable for hidden meanings or manipulations. I never discovered any. I wrote back to commemorate this healing moment. Not for Sophia, but for me. I began the letter by saying this wasn't forgiveness, simply acknowledgement. I wrote that I appreciated her apologies and unapologetic accountability. I said I needed more time and space, maybe a lot more, but I knew she was working on herself and that mattered. I spent 2 hours writing the letter because I kept stopping to make sure I wasn't being harsh or soft, giving her false hope, or being cruel. I carefully stated my expectations of her if we had contact again and what I wouldn't tolerate. I didn't promise a reunion timetable. I realized where we were in my path. After reading it again, I sealed it in an envelope before second-guessing myself. Walking to the mailbox seemed like ending a chapter and recognizing that Sophia may not be in the next. Dropping the letter in the slot brought comfort and grief. Mostly, I felt clear. I expressed what I needed to without resentment. It was finished. 2 weeks later, my firm sent me to a Chicago marketing conference. Work travel number 1 since everything transpired. Being in a new place where no one knew about my sister's turmoil or family issues was nice. Attending conferences, taking notes, and networking with industry peers were my priorities. My supervisor picked me on this trip because of my recent good performance, which felt affirming even without Sophia. I visited the city, ate at places I chose, and loved the freedom to make my own choices during breaks. I actively asked questions and contributed to the conference on new marketing techniques and digital trends. I had supper with coworkers from various firms and discussed career ambitions and industry developments. I recognized I was creating a professional identity and network apart from Sophia's sisterhood and caregiving. Being alone gave me a new perspective on life. I had good relationships with Julia and her friends. My career progressed. Isadora helped me grieve appropriately. I was fine, maybe better. And that revelation hit me hard in a Chicago skyline view hotel room. I had forgotten I could live for myself, since I'd spent so long managing Sophia's demands and emotions. On the penultimate day of the conference, Rachel from a Boston firm joined me for lunch. She casually asked about my family, and I spoke honestly and briefly, without falling apart. I told her my sister and I weren't close right now in a neutral tone. Rachel nodded and went on without asking questions or giving suggestions. That statement's simplicity and lack of elaboration seemed strong. I didn't owe anyone my tragedy or narrative. I could acknowledge the problem without making it the focus of every conversation. While waiting for my trip home, I reflected on my 3-month journey. I went from crying in Aunt Karen's guest room to talking to a stranger about my family without shivering. Growth was tangible and measurable. I didn't act happy or pretend to be okay. I was creating a life that worked for me, where Sophia's absence allowed me to find myself. Toast raced to welcome me at the flat entrance, meowing and stroking my legs. I smiled when Julia placed my favorite treats on the kitchen counter with a welcome home message. I unloaded my luggage and glanced about at our place, the throw cushions we chose, the photographs on the walls, and the plants Julia was training me to maintain alive. I felt at home in this place now, not simply a sanctuary. I didn't live here because I was homeless. I moved here because I wanted to live a life I loved, instead of controlling Sophia's wants and emotions. Julia arrived home from work an hour later and we fixed supper while I informed her about the conference. She offered wonderful questions and appeared engaged in my professional advancement, recognizing my triumphs without trying to take credit. That night, watching a movie on the couch with Toast, I felt content for the first time in years. Healthy partnerships looked like mutual caring and support, not worrying about saying the incorrect thing or being condemned for my decisions. I might exist. Aunt Karen called the next week to ask me to lunch at her favorite downtown cafe. When we met Saturday afternoon, she hugged me tightly before entering. Over sandwiches and coffee, she inquired how I was doing, and I honestly reported my improvement. She nodded and asked follow-up questions to indicate she understood my difficult predicament. She gradually introduced Sophia, monitoring my expression for signals I wanted her to stop. She stated Sophia was doing better, working 2 jobs, visiting her therapist frequently, and taking charge of her life. Aunt Karen claimed I didn't owe Sophia anything or need to reconnect. She was only asking whether I'd want to visit Sophia later. Late, but finally, I pondered the subject while stirring my coffee and considering my desires. I said, Aunt Karen, maybe someday, but I wasn't ready and might never be, so she needed to be good with it. She gripped my hand across the table and said she supported my choice and wouldn't pressure me. Reconciliation was achievable without demanding it on anyone's timescale except mine, making the conversation significant. While going through my phone before bed that night, I realized I hadn't seen Sophia's social media in weeks. I used to check her posts several times a day to see what she was doing and whether she was thinking about me. Now, I couldn't recall when I last checked her profile or updates. For years, I worried about her thoughts and moods. But today, I focused on my own objectives and pleasure. I read books I desired. Taking an online photography class, arranging a weekend vacation to Julia's relatives. Sophia no longer dominated my thoughts. She was in my life, past, and possibly future. But I wasn't focused on her. That change felt like I'd left her shadow and entered my own brightness. When Isadora and I met Thursday, we discussed appropriate boundaries with Sophia if we had contact again. Isadora helped me imagine restricted, organized engagement with obvious repercussions if Sophia reverted to previous practices. We discussed public meetings, topic-focused talks, and an escape strategy if things went bad. She stressed that I could control any future connection and that I didn't owe Sophia our closeness just because we were sisters. This paradigm made future contact less terrifying and more doable. I could see Sophia again without absorbing her worries and feelings. The boundaries we discussed weren't harsh. They were meant to protect me while enabling Sophia to evolve. Isadora reminded me that seeing Sophia once didn't bind me to regular interaction. Controlling this process empowered me. Julia and I reviewed the lease renewal paperwork at the kitchen table once they came. She asked whether I wanted to remain another year, expressing optimism but not pressuring me. I glanced around the flat, thought about my life here, and decided to stay. Signing the form seemed like committing to my new life rather than leaving room to return to my old one. I stopped avoiding Sophia, waiting for things to improve sufficiently for me to return. My space, roommate, and life where I came first were my choices. We celebrated with ice cream and a movie after Julia and I signed our sections. Later that night, I considered how much had changed in 3 months. I went from holding a damaged cake in Sophia's flat to signing a lease on a safe, valued house. Between those 2 occasions seemed like years, not months. Though I still needed treatment and had conflicting sentiments about Sophia and our family, I was content with where I was. Sophia didn't need to change, apologize, or want me back to be happy. It was genuine because I created it on my own decisions, connections, and progress. To give myself time to think before returning to work, I scheduled the tattoo for Tuesday afternoon. In the little tidy shop between a coffee shop and a bookshop, the artist explained my design. A phoenix rising, small enough to fit on my inner wrist and remind me I'd survived something hard. Sophia always claimed tattoos were nasty and made women look cheap. So, I'd listened, even though I'd wanted one since college. The needle stung more than expected, but it was a good pain. It seemed to signify something. I saw the ink take shape on my flesh and realized I made this choice alone. Nothing except my viewpoint mattered. I used money I saved from not paying Sophia's bills when it was finished. It was like crossing an invisible line into a version of myself I liked when I left that business. Thanksgiving came sooner than intended, and Aunt Karen called to confirm my dinner reservation. Sophia would be there, she said. She said it lightly, like I might back out, but I said I'd come. Although I wasn't ready to rebuild anything with Sophia, I wasn't so frail that being in the same room would ruin me. Julia tried to help, but I told her I had to do it alone. Since I dropped Toast off at a friend's house first, I drove to Aunt Karen's with his carrier in the back seat. I mentally practiced calmness throughout the drive. Sophia was eating appetizers at the far end of the living room when I entered. We nodded after making eye contact. This strange, formal acknowledgement that we shared a place but wouldn't pretend everything was good. Aunt Karen placed us at opposite ends of the table for supper, which was intentional yet necessary. I spoke to my uncle and cousins, shared dishes, and laughed at jokes while being aware of Sophia across from me, but not obsessed by it. She looked skinny and exhausted, and I worried I hadn't let her develop. Our distant interaction was courteous, but disconnected, which was unpleasant, but not tragic. Sophia and I both went to the kitchen for coffee after supper. After pouring hers, she asked if I wanted some. This simple act seemed huge considering everything. I agreed, and we stood there, unsure of what to do. She told me she was working 2 jobs, one at a retail shop and one doing administrative work on weekends, and had located an affordable studio apartment. She spoke plainly, not seeking praise or pity about her life. I was delighted she was managing on her own, and I didn't want to take care of her again. She nodded and apologized again, quietly. I took it without forgiving or promising. We weren't close and probably never would be again, but we weren't enemies hiding in a kitchen. Something in between. We were 2 people with DNA and a sad past in this strange neutral zone. I felt lighter when I looked out the window at the dark streets on the way home with Aunt Karen. I no longer needed Sophia's companionship to be okay. I didn't need her to affirm my value or make me feel important. I had Julia, Toast, Aunt Karen, my work, and a life apart from my sister. Standing in her apartment with that damaged cake, I realized our relationship would never be the same. But I made something greater from those broken parts. I was content with life today. Sophia's loss drove me to find myself. I didn't need anything from her to thrive. I had everything I needed within myself, and the real connections I'd built along the way.